Good.
Thank you, that's Concorda. The Stormont House Agreement it's another one in a series of agreements that have been put in place since the Good Friday Agreement, and dealing with issues in relation to the peace process. I think it's very interesting that the first 2 pages of this agreement are about the implementation of austerity in the north. And the Taoiseach has said in his contribution earlier on that it is unique by including so-called sound economic principles in the agreement. And I think this is the failure of this document and of the entire process. How has achieving peace in a fair society become the same as implementing austerity? That's the question I think that has to be answered. The first 2 questions, or the first 2 pages of this agreement, they read like a memorandum of understanding with the Troika here in the South. And it's about implementation of austerity, and it's not about dealing with the issues that have to be dealt with in terms of the North, dealing with the past, Bill of Rights, Irish Language Act. Those are the things that this government should have been focused on in negotiating this agreement. The government in the South has, with an eye on the election here, focused on narrow political aims rather than dealing with and giving proper focus to the outstanding issues of the conflict in the North. And I think that was what the government has had its eye on in dealing with this agreement. For Sinn Féin, and I think they've made a brave attempt to try and justify the agreement here in the House this evening, but this is the conclusion of the road of compromises, and I think it's unfortunate for Sinn Féin that it has come at adding austerity into an agreement which should be a more above that and the narrow views of this right-wing government in the South and the Tory government in England as well. In terms of other parts of the agreement, I think it's ironic that there's a proposed oral history archive included as part of this agreement. Will this go down the same road as the only other oral history archive and the one at Boston College that we've seen in the North? Will this archive be protected from the influence of the PSNI and the British Secret Service into accessing the information provided by people who agree to participate in it? And I think it would be very difficult to get anybody to agree to participate in an oral history archive, given the history of how other archives have been dealt with in this process. The agreement states that the archive will be free from political interference, but how can we have any faith in that, seeing what has gone on in the past? The proposed Independent Commission on Information Retrieval might have some potential to deal with some of the issues in relation to the conflict and families getting some information in relation to what happened to their loved ones. But again, I think the same difficulties will be there in dealing with that as how information will be provided, and the commitment, particularly of the British government, to actually participate fully with it. I think the real problems that haven't been looked at, one of the big issues in the 6 counties is the disenfranchisement of the loyalist communities and how they can get some real political leadership that represent their views. I think that's something that should have been looked at in terms of this agreement, and as an Irish government should have been active in trying to progress. Likewise, I think the agreement is completely silent on the issues around the prisons, as has been outlined earlier by Deputy Wallace. But I think the type of actions that are going on in the prisons and the type of treatment of prisoners who have opposed the Good Friday Agreement sows the seeds of future conflict. And those are things that should be dealt with through these agreements to try and make sure that they remove those seeds and make sure that we can't slip back into conflict at all. You look at the issue of how the prisoners are isolated within the CSU of Maghaberry Prison. Those issues need to be dealt with, and we need to remove the seeds of future conflict. And these agreements it's about removing those seeds and dealing with peace and delivering peace, not about delivering austerity on the people of the North.